A man stands at the edge of a volcano in Guatemala. Lava churns below him. Half the magical world's most powerful archmages are gathered inside a fortified guild building waiting for him to walk through the door. Instead, he opens a portal directly into the building and floods it with molten rock from a different continent. Without being there at all, a portal rips open in the middle of a private conversation and nobody is ready for it. A man and a woman are talking in hushed tones. The woman says the situation is completely under control. She says if anyone tries to break in, she will know about it immediately. She doesn't even get to finish the sentence. The portal tears open from nowhere. A bullet fires through it. The woman drops dead before she hits the floor, and the entire room erupts into chaos. And the man behind all of this? He's a 30-year-old architect who, 1 month ago, didn't even know magic existed. His name is Callum Wells, and he became a criminal against his will. 1 month earlier, Callum is sitting in a guild of magical regulation interrogation room with absolutely no idea how he ended up there. A GMR agent named Turan sits across from him and explains it calmly. Callum was detained on suspicion of involvement in an attack on a fitness center. A dragon has broken free. Callum is the only witness. Callum blinks. A dragon, right? Turan asks where Callum was that morning. Callum says he was at his mother's funeral. That's where this day started, standing graveside, watching strangers pay respects to a woman he loved. And at that funeral, he noticed something strange. A man in the crowd with an unusual aura. Something emanating from him that didn't feel human. Something otherworldly. Here's the thing, though. Callum has seen this before. His entire life, he has noticed certain people who seem to carry something extra. Something no one else around him ever reacted to. He never knew what it was. He just learned to ignore it and move on. After the funeral, he went to the gym. One of the gym owners is a man named Shahi, Mr. Shahai, and the moment Callum walked in, he saw it again. Shahi's true form bleeding through the surface. A massive red dragon aura wrapped around a man pretending to be ordinary. Callum kept his face neutral. He had practice at this. Shahi pulled him aside and asked a small favor. A new girl had just joined the gym, a young woman named Marie, and she needed help getting comfortable with the place. Callum understood what Shahi was actually doing. His wife had died not long ago. Shahi had been quietly trying to introduce him to people ever since. Callum walked over to Marie. She didn't even get to speak her first sentence before she fainted dead on the floor. And then strangers with guns burst through the doors. The noise in the fitness room went from 0 to absolute mayhem in seconds. Shahi shouted. Callum hit the floor. Bullets cracked through the air. He watched Shahi, a man he thought he knew, fighting back against armed attackers with something that was definitely not human strength. And then Callum's world went dark. He woke up inside a burning building. Marie was unconscious beside him. The heat was already suffocating. Callum grabbed her, hoisted her weight against his body, and started moving. He told himself he was not going to let this girl die. He didn't know her. He didn't know her anything. But he kept moving forward through the fire anyway. And then something happened that he still cannot explain. One moment they were inside. The next moment they were standing outside on the pavement. No memory of passing through a door. No memory of a window. Just outside. Clean air. The fire roaring behind them. The strange man from his mother's funeral walked up to him immediately and told him to stand still. Then the man raised his hand and extinguished the entire fire with a stream of water like it was nothing. Callum stood there watching with his mouth open because he was a 30-year-old architect, and this was not supposed to be real. The mage turned to him and calmly asked what his classification was. Callum had no idea what that meant. He said if the man was not going to explain anything clearly, he wasn't going to answer questions. The mage responded by putting handcuffs on him and arresting him on the spot. So that's how Callum Wells ended up in a guild of magical regulation interrogation room. Turan finishes the explanation. He says Callum is not being blamed for what happened, but testing and registration must happen immediately. The guild needs to know where to assign him. Most mages join early in life, children, teenagers at the latest. Callum is 30 years old, and has never been on any magical registry in his entire life. Callum explains his situation simply. He works as an architect. He has his own clients. He has a life. Turan interrupts him and says once Callum understands his abilities, he will find a far better job than architecture. Callum asks what happens if he refuses. Turan's answer is very simple. The guild hunts deserters. When they catch them, they execute them. Callum goes very quiet after that. The testing room is not what he expected. He is placed under a special installation that will pour raw mana into his body to measure his capacity. Turan tells him it only takes a few seconds. Callum watches the device with deep suspicion. He doesn't feel anything. Then he feels everything. Severe pain rips through his entire body all at once. He screams for them to stop. The specialists say it's almost over. He loses consciousness before he can say another word. When he wakes up, there is a symbol carved onto the back of his hand. He didn't consent to it. He wasn't awake to consent to it. The GMR applied a magical tracking mark to his skin while he was unconscious. Turan explains it matter-of-factly, like it's perfectly normal. Callum looks at his hand and says absolutely nothing. But inside, the decision is already forming. He is assigned an escort named Sun for the next week. Sun is a young agent, pyromancer, which means fire. He also has some control over air, which means he can move fast. On the walk home, Callum tries to make conversation and quietly learns everything he can. Sun tells him he will likely be assigned to the transportation department since spatial magic is non-offensive. He mentions the 6 portal worlds, each world populated by different supernatural creatures, and how the guild sends fighters to those front lines regularly. That night, Callum sits at his desk and reviews the materials the GMR gave him. He learns what mana is. He learns what vis is. He picks up a pen from the desk and tries to use magic on it intentionally. The pen flies across the room and smashes into the ceiling hard enough to leave a dent. He stares at the dent for a long time. Then he opens his laptop and Googles the Guild of Magical Regulation. The mortality rate comes up first. Over 50%. Almost all deaths occur among mages who are not protected by large families or the guild itself. The guild takes your freedom, sends you to the front lines, and there's a better than even chance you do not come back. Callum closes the laptop. He opens the safe. He counts his cash. He packs a bag. He jumps out the window. Sun hears the noise and comes running. By the time he reaches the street, Callum is already gone. Sun rises into the air using his wind magic, scanning the crowd below. He considers reporting the escape to Turan immediately, but stops himself. His reputation is on the line. He decides to find Callum himself. He sweeps through the street using air currents so strong that the people walking by look up at the sky, wondering why the wind is suddenly picking up. Callum, meanwhile, ducks into a clothing store and changes his outfit. Sun grabs a passing young man by the shoulder. Wrong person. He finds Callum's abandoned bag on the pavement and realizes the trail is cold. Back at Callum's apartment, Turan is furious. Archmage Davala, a senior GMR authority who had plans to begin training with Callum the very next morning, is going to be even more furious. A mage named Jean examines the empty apartment and remarks that the escape is not surprising. Turan snaps at him. This is not the time for jokes. Jean later reports directly to Davala. She does not take the news well. She declares that Callum is now a criminal mage. She says she hopes he is found soon because criminals must be punished immediately. And somewhere in the city, our boy is already in a taxi heading toward Wesley's farm. Hair dye in one hand and a brand new future in the other. Callum cuts and dyes his hair in a gas station bathroom and tries to look like someone who is definitely not being hunted by a secret magical government organization. He walks into a small pawn shop, meets an orc behind the counter, and trades a laptop and $2,000 for a new ID. Then he gets in a car and drives until the city is far behind him. He ends up in a small, quiet town called Vanut. A girl named Jessica Langley and her father, Sheriff Arthur Langley, meet him at a property for sale. Callum says he wants to buy a house, fix it up, and rest for a while. Jessica says he looks too young to be doing something like that. Callum smiles and says he would be surprised. He buys the house. He has enough money to survive. Now he needs to learn everything he can before the GMR catches up to him. The training starts immediately, and it is not graceful. He practices creating portals in the backyard. The first few attempts produce nothing. He focuses hard, pushes his energy outward, and gets a slight shimmer in the air that collapses before he can step through it. He tries again. He tries again after that. He reflects that the one time he actually created a portal outside the burning gym, he wasn't even trying. His body did it under pure survival instinct. Doing it intentionally is a completely different challenge. Then one morning he pushes and holds, and the portal opens. A real one, solid and stable. He stares at it for a full 3 seconds before he finally steps through. After that, the creativity starts. He creates portals in the shower to reach shampoo bottles on the other side of the bathroom. He practices gravity kinesis in the backyard, dragging rocks and logs across the grass without touching them. By the end of the week, he is attempting to see through solid objects with his eyes closed, an exhausting technique that requires him to sit on the porch for an hour and still only gives him blurry impressions of what's on the other side. It's slow, it's difficult, but the progress is real. Meanwhile, back at GMR headquarters, a specialist brings Taran the results of Callum's testing, and something immediately stands out. Callum was able to dispel 100 units of mana. He absorbed 97 before the bracelet stopped him. A normal beginner would be incapacitated by a fraction of that amount. His vis reserve appears to have never been touched. It's completely full, as if he has been storing power his entire life without ever releasing it. The specialist does not know what this means, but the implication is sitting right there in the numbers. Back in Vanut, Jessica comes by to tell Callum that school is starting soon and children will cut through his yard. He says that's fine. She leaves, and the moment she's gone, Callum realizes the problem. Mana is trailing off him everywhere. He is leaking magical energy like a broken pipe, and he has no idea how to stop it. If GMR sensors pick up that trail, they will be here within days. He focuses. He forces his vis energy into one of the small metal bearings he carries. He presses it inward, compresses it, seals the trail. It works. The energy stops bleeding into the air around him. He also figures out the tracking tattoo on his hand. He stares at it for a long time and then systematically removes the ink from his skin using magic and throws the whole thing into the fireplace. No more direct GPS signal for the guild. He starts planning his long-term strategy. He thinks of his vis like a phone battery, always charging, always maintaining a full reserve so that if he needs to run, he can teleport immediately without hesitation. Then he goes to the local store and runs into Sheriff Langley by complete accident. Langley's niece Clara is working the counter. Langley himself makes small talk, but the undertone is strange. He talks about respecting territory. He mentions suspicious people in the area. His whole demeanor carries a weight that doesn't match the casual conversation. Callum fires back, asking whether Langley really went around warning other people about him specifically. Langley admits he was initially suspicious, but later decided Callum wasn't dangerous. Walking home, Callum pieces it together. The massive dog-sized creature he sensed in the store's basement. The talk of territory. The way Langley's eyes shifted. He concludes it quietly, privately. The Langley family are werewolves. That same night, 2 police officers knock on his door to ask where he was the previous evening. Someone broke into a neighboring house. Callum stepped outside at some point during the night when he heard strange sounds. Found nothing, went back in. He tells the sheriff exactly that and mentions the sound from a large beast. Langley thanks him and starts walking back to the car. But before he gets in, the sheriff says something quietly to his partner. He says they actually already know who the criminal is. He's bitterly disappointed it's true. Things in Venut, he mutters, are getting darker. The next day, the supernatural politics of the town comes spilling into the open. At the sheriff's office, a vampire walks in to dispute territory claims. Langley tells him point-blank that one of his wolves was killed by vampires and the cover-up was obvious. The vampire denies everything and says if the pack wants to start something, they should go ahead. Langley throws the vampire out of his office. He calls Alpha Chester afterward, the Midwest Pack's leader, who tells him the same vampire situation has developed in 5 neighboring cities simultaneously. Something bigger is behind it. Chester says he will send people to help, but they must be careful. Without solid proof, the GMR will side with the vampires. The intercreature agreements are binding and frustratingly precise. Meanwhile, Callum is quietly buying a gun from the local hardware store and thinking about how effective regular ammunition is against supernatural creatures. He notices Jessica and Clara standing nearby, examining hammers. He approaches. They're startled. He apologizes and asks if they're worried about the situation in town. Jessica tells him there's been another murder. A woman this time. The sisters plan to close the cafe for a while. Callum offers help if they need it. He says it casually. He doesn't think about it too deeply. He should have thought about it more deeply. Because the next morning, before the sun is fully up, Jessica is pounding on his door and screaming. Vampires took Clara. During the night, they drove her into a dead end and used hypnosis to take her away. Clara is somewhere in a motel down the road, held captive under a vampire spell that makes it look like she came willingly. And Jessica is standing on Callum's porch reminding him that he promised to help them. He takes a breath. He invites her inside. He uses his spatial awareness to scan the motel remotely. He can feel Clara inside, alive. He drives past slowly just to confirm the reading. Then he goes to the sheriff's department. Langley is furious at Jessica for bringing an outsider in. He looks more like a... Callum stands in the shower for a very long time. He finally understands what is bothering him. He killed people tonight. Not monsters, people. Men and women who were alive this morning and are ash now because he dropped thermite cans through portals and calculated the angles carefully. For a brief moment, he wonders if the GMR was right all along. Maybe restrictions on people with abilities exist for a reason. But then he thinks about Clara, still under vampire hypnosis inside that motel if he hadn't acted. And the thought dies before it finishes forming. He decides he's angry instead. If he'd been smarter about this, if he hadn't let Jessica see his face, he could have done the whole thing without anyone knowing he was involved. That was the real mistake. GMR agents arrive in Venut the next morning. 2 of them. Agent Ray, a mage who reads magical crime scenes using air magic, and Felicia, a fairy who can extract information directly from the minds of the dead. They examine the bodies. Felicia reads 3 corpses and finds nothing useful. Everyone was panicking. Nobody saw anything clearly. Ray decides something is wrong. The pack is hiding something. Their calm is unnatural. He uses his powers to investigate further, and eventually the trail leads him directly to Callum's front door. Both agents show their IDs. Callum says it sounds like he needs a lawyer. Felicia quietly uses her fairy compulsion on him, a subtle pulse of magic designed to make him answer honestly. Callum feels it land and says he only heard about the incident on the news. He keeps his face steady. The agents turn and walk away. Ray stops at the last second and tells Callum not to leave the judicial district. He is the primary suspect in the case. The moment they're gone, Callum is packing a bag. He stops at a highway store on the way out of town. The seller is a werewolf. Callum puts a gold bar on the counter and walks out 20 minutes later with a new ID listing him as a professor and a used car. He also, through a portal, passes a message to Chester through the werewolf. Clara's friend is safe. Chester receives the message and is immediately fascinated. He sets his hacker, a non-magical woman named Lucy, to track Callum through city cameras. Lucy plots his likely route and identifies his pattern. The man keeps visiting bookstores. Chester tells his wolves to stand down and let Callum come to him. Callum, meanwhile, finds a magical bookstore and spends over $1,000 on 4 books that don't give him his change back. He reads everything he can about ceramic spell plates, spatial theory, and the applications of this energy that the GMR never bothered to explain to him. Then he finds a second bookstore, and inside it he finds Gale. She's young, clearly trained, and sitting at a table trying to decode a book that is obviously making her furious. Callum walks over and says that no matter who wrote the book, half of it is probably nonsense. She laughs. He introduces himself as Professor Brown. She introduces herself as Gale Har. She's a healer trying to avoid getting a mandatory mentor by completing an independent personal project. She doesn't like the archmage who keeps trying to supervise her. She needs help. They agree to study together. Their first lesson reveals something interesting. Callum suggests that healing and attacking magic are not separate. They're the same energy applied differently. He tells her about human biology, about what happens in a body on a biochemical level. He writes down medical notes on a piece of paper and tells her to study them at home. Gale looks at the notes like he handed her a treasure map. She thanked him more sincerely than he expected. The same day, Chester contacts Callum through a note slipped into his bag by the werewolf bookstore owner. Callum finds Chester's phone number and thinks about it for a long while. Then he calls. Chester makes his offer directly. He wants Callum to clear 4 vampire-infested cities that are attacking Chester's pack influence and reducing the Alpha's territorial control. In exchange, data on the GMR and an introduction to Jasper, Chester's magical expert. The information could be invaluable for someone trying to stay hidden. Callum isn't sure he can do it. Last time he thinks he just got lucky. Chester mentions that a folder with vampire intelligence has been left in a nearby trash can. Callum retrieves it, reads it, and starts planning. The first target is a movie theater. 9 vampires plus an earth mage inside. Magic shields everywhere. Callum doesn't go through the door. He doesn't need to. He positions thermite cans at calculated angles and drops them through portals one by one. The building lights up from the inside. By the time the Earth Mage finally responds and steps out of his office, everyone is dead and the structure is burning. The boulder that Callum drops on him from 200 feet up doesn't leave any questions about survivability. The second target is harder. He scans the nest and finds 2 innocent people, a young man and woman handcuffed in a locked room. He cannot leave them. He prepares 6 thermite cans, detonates them simultaneously, and in the chaos he steps through a portal directly into their cell. They stare at him in pure terror. He tells them to stand up and holds out his hands. They get out. He pulls them through to safety, refuses to answer any of their questions, and disappears before they can get his name. Alpha Chester messages him. The remaining vampires are retreating. The job is done. In the aftermath, Chester introduces Callum to Jasper, his magical expert, and to Lucy, the hacker. Lucy immediately offers to help. Callum agrees. Jasper sends files on grimoires and magical theory. Lucy starts building a research profile on everything guild-related that Callum might need. Antoine, the head of the vampire faction, calls Chester during all of this and demands the werewolves pull back from vampire territory. Chester responds with absolute calm that none of his wolves were anywhere near the nests. Antoine says he will find out who is responsible. Chester hangs up and privately celebrates. But the GMR agents are already at the second crime scene. Ray compares the 2 attacks and notices the shift. The first assault was emotional and reactive. The second was calculated and planned. Someone is getting better very quickly. He pulls Felicia aside and tells her they need to speak to Chester. All the incidents are on his territory. Maybe the fairies know something too. The interview with Chester produces nothing. The Alpha is cooperative in the way that powerful people are cooperative when they have nothing to worry about, warmly and completely unhelpfully. Meanwhile, Callum is back in the bookstore meeting Gale for their second session. She hands him a telekinesis plate she has been practicing. It works. She is so genuinely happy that she throws herself into his arms to say thank you, and Callum, a man who has been running for weeks, stands there for a moment looking surprised and then laughs quietly. Their lessons continue. Gale improves fast. Incredibly fast, actually. Callum reverse engineers the GMR's home bond technology and then decides to build one himself. It starts with Gale. She asks her father to borrow the family's home bond device, a private teleportation tool personally distributed by Archmage Davala, for her study group. Her father reluctantly agrees. 1 week later, she brings it to their session and hands Callum the plate and the activation ring. Callum holds it. He looks at it. He uses his spatial intuition to see every encrypted magical mark on the ring, marks that are invisible to anyone without his specific ability. He describes the device's exact function accurately enough that Gale stares at him in open amazement, wondering how a professor who claims to be a beginner knows this much. He memorizes everything and hands it back. That night, he sits down with laser engraving tools and reconstructs the marks from memory. He charges the ring with his own vis energy. He tests it by teleporting to the bathroom. He hits himself very hard on the side of the bathtub on landing. He picks himself up, notes what went wrong, and adjusts. The second test works. The implications hit him immediately. The GMR has been deliberately limiting what spatial mages are allowed to know. Davala controls every one of them personally, because she is the only one who understands what spatial magic can actually do. A spatial mage born once every 30 to 40 years is not a resource. It is a monopoly, and Callum just taught himself to bypass the entire system. He realizes he is in far more danger than he previously understood. Around the same time, Gale takes her formal examination. She breezes through healing. She passes light and movement and shield without drama. Then she stands in front of the attack spell portion of the test, faces a training mannequin, and concentrates. The mannequin is destroyed. The examiner asks how she did it. Gale explains she used healing in reverse. She created blood clotting inside the mannequin's simulated body, an inverted healing attack that targets biological function directly. The examiner's face does something complicated. He says he needs to check something. He leaves. 4 hours pass. When someone finally comes back to see Gale, it is not the exam panel. It is agents Ray and Felicia. Ray tells her he is not here about the exam result. He is interested in the attack specifically. Where did the idea come from? Who taught her to think that way? Gale introduces her source as Professor Brown and asks if there is a problem. The agents ask her to tell them everything she knows about this man. At the bookstore where Callum and Gale are supposed to meet for their next session, the GMR has surrounded the building entirely. Felicia says the guild is probably overdoing this for one person. Ray explains, when Archmage Har, Gale's grandfather, heard that his granddaughter had been manipulated by a criminal, he personally insisted on joining the capture operation. Ray was unable to dissuade him. Callum teleports to the bookstore entrance. The tracking specialists see the teleport happen and immediately relay the information. Ray is stunned. Everyone believed Callum was a gravity mage. The spatial magic is confirmed now. He commands them to move before Callum disappears again. Callum is hit by bullets. A chain wraps around him that cuts off his ability to use magic. A special rope binds him before he can react. He is surrounded by armed agents, and he is not going anywhere. Archmage Har arrives on the scene and demands Callum be handed over to him immediately. Ray holds firm. The guild is investigating a series of murders and needs to question the suspect first. Har agrees to wait. Barely. A search finds the bearing in Callum's pocket. Ray announces it. The killer has been found. The interrogation room is quiet and cold. Callum wakes up handcuffed to a chair and takes a moment to be furious at himself for not teleporting the instant he sensed the other mage's presence. He let himself get comfortable. He got sloppy. Ray and Felicia sit across from him. Ray uses his real name. Callum understands. They know everything now. His full identity. His history. All of it. Felicia uses her compulsion magic on him immediately. She asks if he was responsible for the vampire nest destruction in Venut. He says nothing. Ray points to the bearing. Felicia explains they are less interested in the what and more interested in the why. Callum is not from this area. He had no personal stake here. Why did he get involved? Callum says, because vampires kill people. Ray says that does not matter right now. Callum responds with visible anger. Then they shift to Gale. They tell him that because of what he taught her, she could become a criminal mage. Ray says he corrupted magic by mixing it with ordinary human understanding of biology. Callum points out that the GMR itself requires mages to know offensive spells. He raises his voice. He gets shocked by magic through the restraints. Felicia leans forward and says softly, if he wants to help Gale, he should start cooperating. Callum smiles. He says the agents are using the girl to make him talk. He says the moment the guild feels threatened, the secret police appear. He adds that after this conversation is over, none of them will see him again. Ray watches him carefully and realizes Callum has not been trying to open a portal. He was never trying to portal out of this room. Callum says he does not need one. He placed his personal home bond somewhere the agents cannot retrieve. He has had it hidden since before he sat down. Then he disappears. Felicia lunges and grabs nothing but air. Ray calls a level 4 alert. The room floods with agents within seconds. Callum is not there. Felicia cannot understand it. The room was sealed against home bonds. Ray says someone helped him build that device. It should be impossible without guild resources. The implication lands on both of them at the same time. There's a mole inside the GMR. Davala is informed. She is furious, but also, for the first time, alarmed. She explains the real reason Callum's freedom is so threatening. Healing magic, she tells Jean, can bypass normal mana protection if used aggressively. Gale now knows how to do this. If she develops it further, she becomes a genuinely dangerous opponent. And spatial mages are born once every 30 to 40 years. Davala needs every single one of them under her direct control. Callum, meanwhile, is free and already thinking about his next move. He contacts Lucy, who nearly cries when she hears his voice. He asks where to get magical equipment. She says it won't be easy. Everything is regulated. But she'll try. She also confirms Archmage Davala is furious. And the word going around the guild is that nobody has ever made Davala furious like this before. And yes, it gets worse. Callum camps in a forest near fairy territory because, apparently, surviving the entire GMR is not enough challenge, and he needs more problems. He's careful. He knows fairies are unpredictable and dangerous, and he has never interacted with one directly. He sets up his tent, studies the materials Lucy sent, and uses his senses to monitor the surrounding area. That's when he feels them. A hunting party moving through the trees. Fairy hunters and their pixie companions, running down prey for sport. Not far away, a young man and a young woman are sprinting through the dark. The girl can barely keep running. The man pulls her forward and tells her if they stop now they die like the others. They were hunted purely for entertainment. Callum thinks about his father. A memory from childhood, standing on a playground watching bullies hurt another kid and saying nothing because it wasn't his turn on the slide. His father found him standing apart from everything and asked why he didn't help. Callum said it was someone else's problem. His father said, villains only win when good people stand aside. He climbs out his tent. He tells himself, no matter who he deceives, he is a good person. Then he goes hunting the fairy hunters. He uses his senses to track the entire party. He counts them. He takes 24 rounds of ammunition. He finds a couple first, appears in front of them from a portal, and gives them precise instructions on where to go to reach safety. He tells them he cannot go with them. His presence might draw attention. He promises to meet them there. He sends them off. Then he turns back toward the hunters. The pixie companions disappear through portals one by one. The two fairy hunters notice suddenly that their assistants are gone. Before they can react, a portal opens beneath them. One tree-like wooden warrior barely escapes. A second wooden warrior is killed by a boulder that drops through a teleporter with surgical precision. The female hunter is enraged. Someone dared to attack them. She is mid-sentence when a portal appears directly in front of her face and a bullet fires through it. She drops dead instantly. The male hunter sees this. He senses Callum nearby. The surviving wooden warrior raises a bow and fires. Callum sees the arrow at the last possible moment and disappears. He reappears elsewhere. The male hunter is suddenly behind him, impossibly fast, and throws him across the clearing before Callum can raise his pistol. Callum hits the ground hard and does not immediately understand what just happened. He uses his senses. The hunter is inside a tree trunk. That's how they move, through the wood itself, flowing from tree to tree like water through pipes. Callum waits. When the hunter lunges again, Callum activates a sequence of teleports simultaneously, opening multiple portals in coordinated positions. The creature is killed by the combined strike before it can complete the attack. Callum opens a portal and gets out. He meets the couple at the safe point, tells them everyone needs to pretend this never happened, and then calls Chester. Chester immediately recognizes the description of the fairy hunters. Noble birth. Callum needs to leave immediately. These are not creatures you casually cross. He offers Callum a position working directly for him. Callum refuses. After the last GMR confrontation, freedom is worth more to him than any protection. Chester hangs up and tells Lucy he cannot figure out what Callum is thinking. He also tells her something else. He does not believe Callum's magic awakened randomly. He thinks the man has influential relatives nobody knows about. Back in the forest, Fairy King Jisoo arrives at the scene of the battle. He uses earth magic to replay the events like a recording, and he sees Callum's face clearly. He kills an airport worker who speaks to him with insufficient deference. He commands his steed. He is now hunting Callum personally. Callum, on a plane to Europe, is in the bathroom bandaging his wounds from the fight. He thinks about Gale and her healing ability and hopes one day he gets a chance to make things right with her. He doesn't know yet that Gale has chosen a very different path. A flight attendant walks in on him mid-bandage and immediately backs out with an apology. Callum changes clothes and returns to his seat. Normal person behavior. Hours later, Ray is meeting with King Jisoo, who describes the magical technique of the person who attacked his people. Ray smiles and shows Jisoo a photograph of Callum. In Switzerland, Callum finds the portal to the dragon world, distracts the single guard with a stolen radio through a portal, and slips through. On the other side, the light is different. The air is different. The magic is completely different, thicker, older, more present everywhere. He looks around at a world that is genuinely beautiful and then feels the enormous presence before he sees it. A massive red dragon appears directly in front of him. Unfriendly, then softening. Shahi. The two old friends sit down together, and Shahi makes tea. He says he didn't realize Callum was a mage. Callum says he barely believes it himself. Shahi explains the attacks in the gym, a personal conflict from long ago, and then tells Callum something he has been carrying for a very long time. Callum was not raised by his biological parents. His biological mother left immediately after birth. His maternal grandparents took over. His biological father was a mage. Shahi never met him. But the ability to see through every magical disguise, to perceive true forms that no one else notices, that came from his father. Callum sits very still. He says he suspected something was wrong with his family. He was just afraid to ask. Shahi puts a hand on his shoulder. He says the people who raised Callum, the grandparents, the family he knew, were good people. Dragons have a rule about not interfering in human affairs. He stayed away from everything, but he watched. Callum asks what he should do next. Shahi thinks. Then he shifts into his true form, a creature larger than anything Callum has ever seen, and says simply, "Be strong." Callum goes to the Nightlands. The portal there is less guarded than the dragon world. Callum teleports through so fast the single guard notices something strange with the portal for a moment and then decides it must be his imagination. Inside the Nightlands, it is permanent night. The city below has both vampires and ordinary mages, people who chose to live in the portal worlds rather than under GMR control. Callum immediately recognizes that this is the worst possible location for him. Two groups of enemies. But Shahi said the materials here would be worth it. He goes to the forest to find them. He follows a small winged creature to its nest and uses a druid in a very creatively violent way, opening a portal in front of the druid's outstretched hand and a second portal behind its own body, so its hand pierces through itself. He then extracts raw mortite from the nest, uses a dead body as bait for the tentacled water creature guarding the materials, and walks out with a full backpack. The Bureau of Secrecy has already deployed an agent, a man named Tyson, to the Nightlands because they detected his presence. They classify him as a top-level threat. GMR agents discover the robbed nest hours later and mobilize immediately. The entire guild deploys. Callum barely escapes the pursuit, moving through portals so frequently that he feels physically sick from the transitions. He opens a 500-meter jump and lands in Paris. He ends up at a Parisian cafe, trying to recover when Sun, the young pyromancer who lost him at the beginning, finds him. Sun unleashes fire at full strength. Callum opens a portal in front of himself, and the attack passes harmlessly through to another location. He opens a second portal behind himself and escapes. The cafe is nearly destroyed. 18 people die from the collateral damage of Sin's reckless spell. Sun is dragged in front. Callum finds a fabrication shop in Texas and hands a red-haired girl his Nightlands materials along with a hand-drawn sketch of what he needs built. She studies the sketch. She runs tests on the metal alloy. She tells him she has never seen anything like it. The melting point doesn't match any known material. After days of experimentation, she produces nearly 3 kilograms of thin mortite wire and several copies of his design. Callum pays her a considerable amount and walks out of the shop changed. He now has the materials to build his own teleportation network. No more renting lockers across the state. No more dependence on hidden caches. He will carry his resources inside a pocket dimension of his own creation. He sits down and practices vis threads, forcing his energy outward into thin strands. The first attempts produce nothing. The 10th attempt produces a shiver of energy that collapses immediately. But on the 15th attempt, the thread holds. He transforms it into a ball of energy, and then, slowly, carefully, he expands the space inside it. The inside is larger than the outside. A personal pocket dimension. Small scale, nothing dramatic, but the principle is proven and the potential is enormous. He calls Lucy. She is giddy. She tells him he is the only person in the entire magical world, making the GMR nervous right now. She also says the vampires are going into hiding because of what he's done to their nests. Then she tells him something that makes the smile disappear. The couple he rescued from the vampire nest, the young man and woman he carried through a portal at the second location, have been found by the GMR and are being prepared to be handed back to the vampires. The guild's rules require it. Callum is silent for a moment. Then he asks Lucy for the name of every agent and vampire involved. He appears outside the GMR headquarters building in Kansas and stares at it. He tells himself, until he can improve his abilities, he cannot take the building directly. But he will prepare. He will learn. And he will find a way. He calls Jasper to ask about magical development in late-starting mages. He learns that if a child never grew up around magic, they could not access their powers. Mana in the environment is what triggers the ability. Callum realizes privately. The first time he ever used magic successfully was in Shahi's presence. A dragon whose sheer existence floods the area with mana. Shahi unknowingly activated what had been dormant in Callum for 30 years. He builds a device for Chester. A second home bond, customized for werewolf physiology. Bigger, no security features, but functional. Chester buys it immediately. He says it is needed. He also tells Lucy he wants another one, even bigger. He is not wrong about needing it. The vampires send Alas and his squad to Venut to kidnap Clara and use her as leverage to find Callum. Chester learns of the plan and moves first, teleporting the Langley family to safety using the home bond, and then positioning his pack in Venut before the vampires arrive. When Alas' squad appears, Chester is ready. The battle is direct. Wolves against vampires in the dark streets of the town they were trying to steal. Alas makes his final gamble and charges Chester directly, wounds him in the chest, pressing his hand into the wound. Chester tears him apart. The remaining vampires see the enraged alpha and walk away. Chester stands in the aftermath and tells his pack, from this day forward, Vanut is free. He also points out that the home bond Callum built was essential. If they had used GMR devices, the guild would have been alerted and everything would have fallen apart. Meanwhile, a GMR employee discovers suspicious money transfers in Lucy's financial records. She tried to hide the transactions. She made small mistakes. The trail is visible if you know what you're looking for. The next morning, Lucy arrives at the office. It's empty. She got an urgent letter to come in. She makes coffee and waits. Then she senses something is wrong. Felicia appears before Lucy can leave and stops her with compulsion magic. Ray appears behind Felicia. Lucy cannot move. Ray announces she has been caught conspiring with the criminal Wells. She is stripped of all duties and rights and taken immediately into custody. Callum calls Lucy's number. Agent Ray answers. Callum destroys the phone with magic before Ray finishes his first sentence. He sits still for a moment. He thinks about what he promised. He starts destroying all his equipment systematically to prevent being traced. He could run. He has money. He could buy land somewhere far and disappear. But he promised Lucy, and he does not break promises. He goes to Vanut. Jessica sees him come through the cafe door, and her expression shifts from surprise to something complicated. Callum came back. He actually came back. In the GMR prison, Lucy sits in her cell, repeating basic facts about herself to stay calm. Someone approaches the camera feed. A hand reaches toward her head, and she feels something, a small healing pulse, and her mind clears slightly. She looks up. Gail Har is standing at the camera. Gail tells Lucy she means no harm. She asks if Lucy knows Callum Wells. Lucy says she spoke with him but never met him in person. Gail says she doesn't care what Lucy told the agents. She's there for her own reasons. Gail explains, because of what Callum taught her, her entire family turned away from her. Everything collapsed. Lucy says quietly, Callum is a good... The volcano is enormous up close. Callum stands at the edge of the crater and looks down at the lava churning 200 meters below and thinks, this is either the best idea he has ever had or the last one. Every archmage in the magical world is gathered inside the GMR's primary facility right now. Every agent is on standby. Davala is patrolling the perimeter. They're waiting for one young man to walk through the front door so they can end this story quickly and cleanly. He is not going to walk through the front door. He activates the teleportation plate Chester's contact planted inside the building. He uses it not as a transport. Stepping through a portal that close to the facility would be suicidal, but as an antenna, a navigation beacon, a way to read the interior from several thousand miles away without setting foot inside. He uses his spatial senses, amplified through the relay plate, to map the entire building. He finds the weak structural points. He locates every gathering of agents. He finds Lucy's cell. She is sleeping. He breathes out. She is still okay. He also confirms agents are everywhere inside that building. Every corner, every corridor. This is the most fortified the guild has ever been. But they're looking at the door. Nobody is watching the volcano. Callum opens the portal. Inside the GMR facility, an archmage is mid-sentence briefing his assistant on Callum's predicted arrival when heat erupts from nowhere. Screams. The entire internal communication network drops simultaneously. Every team cut off from every other team in the same instant. The archmage throws a barrier around himself and his assistant and holds it, but the barrier only covers a small area, and beyond it the building is chaos. Archmage Har appears through the smoke, face twisted with fury, and declares that he will personally end Callum Wells. Davala appears from the perimeter side. She has been outside and is moving fast. She meets the other archmages in the burning corridor, and then she stops. Her expression changes. She says, he is not here. If Callum were inside the building, she would feel his presence. she would feel the specific signature of spatial magic. She has studied it her entire career. She can detect it at a distance. She is not detecting it inside this building anywhere. The attacks are coming from somewhere else entirely. Callum, standing at the volcano rim, exhausted and trembling slightly from the sustained effort of holding a portal this large open across this distance, counts down for the next phase. He has been doing this for long enough that his hands are shaking and his vis reserve, that enormous full reserve built up over 30 years of non-use, is finally starting to feel the strain. But he is not finished yet. He redirects the flow. The lava moves through the portal at a new angle, cutting across the surveillance infrastructure specifically, the network of observers and tracking systems that the Guild uses to monitor every magical being across the country. The systems that watch for Callum, the systems that watch for Lucy, the systems that track Chester's home bonds. He is not trying to destroy the building. He is cutting out the Guild's eyes. The surveillance network, the GMR's primary method of tracking and catching magical beings, goes dark. Inside, the senior archmage is trying to contact Davala and getting silence. He tells his assistant to find any operational communication channel and is told there are none. The assistant says it looks like they are completely isolated from all networks. Nobody can contact anyone inside or outside the building. Har is screaming somewhere down the corridor. Felicia is trying to organize agents who cannot receive orders because the relay system is offline. Ray is standing in the ruins of a communication station, looking at the situation and doing the rare thing he does when a plan falls completely apart. He goes very still and starts thinking from scratch. Meanwhile, Chester's people inside the GMR, the plants, the wolves who have been working there carefully and quietly, risking exposure every day, activate on Chester's signal. They are not fighting. They are moving. They are reaching Lucy's cell through the internal routes they have memorized, using the chaos and the collapse surveillance as cover. They have approximately 2 minutes before the backup systems start coming online. They get to the cell. Lucy looks up and sees a man she does not recognize reaching for the lock. He says Chester sends his regards. She gets up immediately without another question. She has been in this cell long enough to know that when the surveillance goes dark and someone comes for you, you do not ask for identification. Callum senses her movement. He tracks her through the building remotely, reading her vis signature through the relay plate. He coordinates the extraction path in real time.